A special case of a monopoly that we mentioned at the beginning of the chapter is a natural monopoly, and that stems from having such large economies of scale. So basically, as they increase their production, their long-run average total costs are going to decrease. And we typically see a lot of utilities companies operating as a natural monopoly. And an example of this is going to be Florida Power and Light, who provide electricity for residents here in Miami-Dade County. And under the natural monopoly, we do want to note that it's going to be more cost effective and more efficient for one firm to actually service the entire area rather than having a lot of smaller firms and having a lot of competition. So essentially, demand can only support one particular firm. So here, let's take a look at the natural monopoly. Natural monopoly. Monopoly. So with the natural monopoly, like we said before, demand can only support one firm. Demand can only support one firm. If we actually had more than one firm, it's going to lead to higher costs and more inefficiencies. So that's why exactly the government is going to allow this natural monopoly to go ahead and take place, where only one firm is going to service everybody within a particular market. So here, if there's more than one firm, leads to higher costs and inefficiencies. So leads to higher costs and inefficiencies. So instead of just having FP&L provide electricity for us, suppose that we had a lot of other smaller firms as well. So maybe say 3 or 4 other firms. That means all of these firms would have to have their own power plants. They would have to have their own delivery people. They would have to have their own utility people. They would have to have their own technicians. They basically have to have all the power lines set up as well. And that would just create a lot of chaos. It would increase costs exponentially. And it would just be very, very inefficient having all these current firms and companies provide electricity when one big firm can exactly do that for a much lower cost and be more efficient doing so. So because of this, because this one firm has been able to set economies of scale very, very early in the production process, the government is going to allow this natural monopoly to go ahead and take place. But the government would not like the natural monopoly to abuse its power because they are in a monopoly position, and that's where a lot of regulation actually does come into play. So to prevent a natural monopolist from exploiting its market power, the government is going to use regulations such as average cost pricing, the rate of return regulation, and price cap regulation. So what exactly are the similarities and differences between all of these regulations? We'll go ahead and take a closer look at it. First, with average cost pricing. Suppose that we take a look at this particular chart right here. We have demand, we have marginal revenue for the natural monopolist, and we notice that the ATC and the marginal cost curves are continuously decreasing in this instance. They are no longer U-shaped. And the reason for this is because we are working under the natural monopoly where their average costs are falling. Remember, because they're able to establish these economies of scale early, the more they produce, the higher the production, the costs are going to be falling. So this is why we have a downward sloping ATC and a downward sloping marginal cost curve rather than the typical U-shaped one that you're accustomed with. So suppose there are 3 scenarios that we want to go ahead and take a look at. If the natural monopolist had no regulation at all, where do you think it would like to operate at? Obviously, it would like to operate at the monopoly price. So if we follow the 5-step pattern for maximizing profits, we notice that, hey, this is the intersection of marginal revenue and marginal cost. The price that the monopolist would like to charge without any regulation is a very, very high price of PM right here. We can call this the monopolist price. But in order to bring the monopolist price out into the marketplace, they have to reduce the quantity by quite a lot, so the output they provide is going to be QM. And this is what the monopolist would like to charge without any regulation at all. So let's go ahead and write down this first scenario. So scenario number 1, the monopoly without regulation. Monopoly without regulation. Regulation would like to operate where MR equals to MC, where marginal revenue equals to marginal cost. So our typical 5-step pattern for maximizing profits, marginal revenue equals to marginal cost, and that'll lead us with a quantity of QM and a price of PM. So very low quantity, very high prices. However, the government, the regulators, aren't going to be very happy with this outcome right here, and they would instead like to invoke something known as the marginal cost pricing rule. So here, regulators would instead like to invoke, the marginal cost pricing rule. Marginal cost pricing rule. And the marginal cost pricing rule is exactly where price is equal to marginal cost. So the price that they charge on the marketplace is exactly equal to the natural monopolist marginal cost. So in essence, it's going to be with a price of PC and a quantity of QC. So our price equals to marginal cost is exactly at this point right here. So the natural monopolist is going to end up charging a very, very low price of PC. It's essentially the competitive price, and they're going to have a lot of quantity being provided out into the marketplace, a quantity of QC. However, there's going to be an inherent issue with this marginal cost pricing rule. And can you see it? What is going to be the major problem for the monopolist in this case? If the regulators are successful in implementing the marginal cost pricing rule, the monopolist is going to incur losses because the price is below the average total cost. If they had to be charged a price of PC, if they're charging a price of PC, the average total cost, the cost for the firm is going to be higher. So price less than ATC, the firm isn't going to incur some type of economic losses. So that's not going to be a very good outcome for the natural monopolist either. So in this scenario, the monopoly incurs losses. That's because price is less than ATC. Remember, anytime price is less than ATC, the firm earns losses. So that is not something that the monopolist would want, even though the regulators would like it. So what do? We're going to have some type of compromise between the natural monopoly and the regulators, and the in-between is going to be something known as the average cost pricing rule. So here, they compromise, the regulators and the monopoly, they compromise and use the average cost pricing rule. And the average cost pricing rule is exactly going to help the firm earn some type of normal profits. And it's going to be the point at which price is equal to ATC. So here, price is equal to ATC. And what do we figure out about quantity and prices? We figure out that quantity is going to equal to QR. And we also notice that price is equal to PR as well. So here, the firm is able to earn some type of normal profits or zero economic profits, which, remember, tells us that they're going to have some type of positive accounting profits. So we have PR and QR under the average cost pricing rule. So here we have QR, and then we also have PR right here. So for the marginal cost pricing rule, we have this one. We have without regulation, that's situation number 1. And then we have the average cost pricing rule, that's situation number 3. So here with the marginal cost pricing rule, we're going to have QC and PC. So we'll go ahead and write that down as well. We have QC and PC just for completion. So we know exactly each quantity and price combination that the firm is going to be charging with these 3 scenarios right here. And because they basically compromise with the average cost pricing rule, we do know that the monopoly is allowed to earn some type of normal rate of return. So this allows the monopoly to earn normal profits and a normal rate of return. So with all of this, we have 3 scenarios right here. One very good for the monopolist, one very good for the regulators and for us as consumers, but they want to get in the in-between, somewhere in between each of these extremes right here, and that's where the average cost pricing rule is going to come into effect, where price equals to ATC, and that allows the firm, the monopolist, to earn normal profits and a normal rate of return. The other scenarios that we notice is going to be very high prices, but very low quantity with the monopolist, with what the monopolist wants. We have the other end of the extreme, which is the competitive outcome, but that is going to cause the monopolist to incur some type of losses. And then finally, the in-between with the average cost pricing rule, which is going to be the compromise between these 2 extremes right here. And it's exactly what the regulators are going to use in order to regulate this natural monopolist. There are 2 more ways to regulate monopolies, and we'll go ahead and take a closer look at that in our next video.